Hello, guys, and thank you for joining me today for our Stories That Sell training. I don't think that we talk enough about the power of stories and how it really magnetizes you as a coach, as a consultant, as a healer. And so, what I really want to talk about and dig into how you can tell those stories from a place of soul, how you can tell those stories from a place of passion, not from a place of force or uncertainty or anything like that. So, let's dive in. Today, we're going to talk about first the purpose of storytelling. Then, we'll talk about the steps to storytelling. And then, we'll talk about the next steps you need to take to start getting ready to step into the storytelling. All right. So, the purpose of storytelling is that it's a very, very powerful coaching tool. And a lot of times people will try to frown upon it. But if you notice, some of the most successful people, when they're doing presentations or speeches, they start with a story because they understand the need for their audience to be able to relate to them, for them to be able to articulate and to be able to share their own values. And they understand that storytelling is actually one of the most effective means of communication. I can't tell you how many books I've read that I don't remember anything else in the book, but I'll remember one part in one story, right? One little story about it. Or how many, I remember my college graduation. I don't remember what the rest of the speech was, but I remember the story that the person shared during that time, right? The story of looking for a job and trying to find themselves after a degree. That story is embedded in my mind because it related to me, right? And this is why it's so powerful because when you begin to storytell as a coach, it humanizes your brand. It lets people see that who you are behind the brand. Because here's the thing, people can buy from anyone, but there's a reason that they're choosing to buy from you. And when you showcase your personality, when you showcase who you are behind the scenes, and like I said, humanizes your brand, lets people relate to you, and it keeps the attention on you because people will come back for more and for more and for more. And when you use your own experiences, you can actually validate your audience's current experiences. So again, I can't tell you how much storytelling, how valuable storytelling is, because it just really brings your story to life. It brings and it evokes those emotions, and it creates that like immersive and engaging experience that just allows your audience to feel so heard and so held. So this is the value behind storytelling. Let's talk about how you do it. So obviously you're going to want to begin with some market research, right? Because the truth is there's a million different stories that you can tell for a million different reasons, right? When I was doing my happily divorced course program, I talked about different stories of my divorce life and being a single mom and balancing all the things and overcoming heavy emotions, right? There were different parts of that story. When I was becoming a coach, right? Or when I was becoming a coach trainer, I talked about my journey through coaching to be able to help other coaches that were stuck, that didn't feel heard or didn't know the next step, know that they were heard, know that their experience was validated. When I was talking about helping people write books, I talked about my journey in book writing and balancing all of that as a mom and having a full time job and my own limiting mindset beliefs. So here's the thing, there's a million stories that you could think are really, really powerful, but are they going to resonate and relate to your audience? And this is where market research really comes in, and market research really becomes powerful because when you share these stories with your audience, you want to make sure that it relates and resonates with your audience. And so doing that market research is really going to help you lay that healthy foundation from which you can build upon your storytelling. So with market research, start paying attention to like what questions your audience is asking you. Start paying attention to what other coaches might be talking about that are in the same industry as you. I know recently I got a question about, I shared a little bit about human design and like how I was making like an aligned decision. And someone asked me what got you into your human design journey? And I kind of blew that question off. Like I answered the question in the DMs, but I didn't think much else about it. And then about a week later, someone else asked me that same question. So I decided people want to know my journey and where I was at. That got me to decide that I wanted to learn more about human design. So literally, I talked about this point in my life where I felt very unfulfilled after my divorce, right? Finding myself and redefining myself as a single, and then really trying to force myself into a box that didn't fit, and how I had to step myself out of that, right? And how I had to give myself permission to be unapologetically myself. That came from market research, paying attention to what my audience was liking and engaging in, paying attention to what questions they were asking, paying attention to what resonated with them, asking questions. right? Asking questions. You can even put yourself out there. Like, would you love to hear more about my journey into, overcoming anxiety? Would you love to hear, more behind, would you love to see more behind the scenes? Would you love to see what I do with my kids in the background? Like, start asking questions and engage your audience, because you're going to get the research that you need so that you can showcase yourself as the expert and the leader that you're called to be in this space. Okay. So when you do that market research, what you're looking for is you really want to understand your audience's emotions. Okay. And there's a couple different like questions in the workbook that you can kind of break down to dig into understanding your audience's emotions. But what story do you have that relates to where your audience is? Okay. So I know for me as a coach that is working with coaches and helping support coaches to just be the best, coach, consultant, leader, spiritual leader, healer that you guys can possibly be. I talk about how I felt unfulfilled, how I had a whole like, full blown doctorate degree, but didn't feel fulfilled in my career. And I needed that support. I needed someone to tell me that it was okay to do something that my heart was calling me towards, right? But that's where I started when I was talking to people on sales calls or in my DMs or seeing people's comments or posts that they were engaging in. I would see people that would say, I feel so unfulfilled. Like I have the things that society tells me I should be happy about, but I'm really unfulfilled. And so I started to speak to that feeling of feeling unfulfilled, right? And that story, my journey of overcoming that like inadequacy and starting to live more in alignment related and resonated with my audience. But I knew that because I fully understood what emotions they had. And I evoked those emotions by speaking directly to them. 9 times out of 10, you are already your ideal learner. You are already your ideal client. So when you put yourself in your client's shoes, you can start to think about how you can bring awareness to where it is they desire to be. And more importantly than just awareness, you can bring the intention that it's available for them to get to where it is that they desire to be. When you begin to share your story, or when you begin to share stories from your audience or from your clients or who you've helped, you're giving people permission to know that this is available for them, right? That's called an expander. And a lot of times we base our goals, our success, our desires, and our visions based on our current environment, right? What is it that we see that we want to be? Who is it that we see that we want to be? And we play small with it because we think that it's a safe, we want to play safe, right? But when you expand your beliefs, you expand your exposure, you expand your environment, then you allow yourself to see that there are more things available. And that's what you get to do through your storytelling. When you understand your audience's emotions and their pain points, you get to evoke those emotions, bring in stories that resonate and relate to them, and then bring awareness that where they desire to be is available for them. Bring awareness to where they desire to be, that there are steps to be able to get there. Bring awareness that you are the expert that can help to be able to get them there. Okay. Then you want to start thinking about like the pathways, right? How will your audience begin to experience your program? How will your audience experience your program? So as you're thinking about your program and the thing that you want to offer, whether it's one-on-one, whether it's a group coaching program, whether it's a mastermind, a mini mind, a course, passive offer, whatever it may be, you want to think about the best thing I always say is you want to first think about where your audience is, and then you want to think about where they're going. And then you want to determine how you can bridge the gap from where they are to where they want to be. When you have that process laid out, start thinking about how you can explain that, because 9 times out of 10, the reason that your audience is stuck is because they don't believe that there's a journey that can get them from where they are to where they want to be. And so they feel trapped, they feel stuck, they feel unfulfilled, they feel uncertain, they feel defeated. For me, it was very much like, God, is this all that life has to offer? Like there has to be more. Like I know you're calling me to more, right? And so when your audience is feeling that way, we have to be, and God is so great, like he showed me that there was more, but it was my fear that was blocking me, right? My fear got in the way. And when we show our audience that not only is there a foolproof formula, but that you can support them with it, why wouldn't they lean into you? And so thinking about these things, thinking about how you can show them these things is going to be so powerful, because you want them to see you as the expert, and you want them to know that you're that gap bridger or that bridger, you're able to bridge that gap for them. So it's important for you to have a good handle on the journey that you're going to take your audience through, because when you start talking about your story, you can share those bits and pieces of it, right? I know for me, when I was writing my very first book, I actually like went through this well, I guess you can call it like a stair step of affirmation. So I would say affirmations that were just a little bit above where I was. And then once I reached that level, I'd say the next affirmation and the next one. And that became a story of mine. Like I started to share that bit and piece of that story and say, like, this is what I'm doing. This is how I'm bridging my gap. And I started to talk about it. And it really resonated and related to people and drew them into me because they wanted to know, wow, this is available. And there's a formula to get there. And this is a good point where you can start to think like, do you have some proprietary method? Do you have some system or strategy that you have used that has worked? Maybe you've done it one-on-one with your aunt, or maybe you worked yourself through that, right? When I made my happily divorced course, I literally went through the process that I went through to heal my hurt after divorce. This was the same method or system that I used to be able to bring to my clients. So I had a good handle on it. But if you're just on there, like online or posting or talking to clients and you're telling stories all willy nilly, are they going to be able to resonate or relate to that, right? Talk about the things that are going to help them understand that you have a system. You're not just kind of like poking and prodding and hoping that something, sticks or whatever, but you really have a system that's going to help them be able to bridge that gap. Okay. The next step is to understand their buying strategy. So I am a firm believer that how you do one thing is how you do everything. And so for me, what I like to do when I'm thinking of my audience is I weave in 3 different buying strategies because there's a online assessment called the Colby assessment. There is a fee for the Colby assessment, but I will say if you kind of look at some of my notes on the screen, you can get an idea of where you fall with your buying strategy. And typically you will buy things in the same manner. So when you're thinking about your course, your program, your offer, your one-on-one, your mastermind, your mini mind, or whatever it may be, think about the price point for that. Okay. And then think about maybe your process of buying something at that same point. So, like maybe, for example, you're doing like a passive course for $497 and you just bought a really awesome, like comfy chair in your living room for $500. What was the process that you needed to go through to make that happen? Did you write a pros and cons list? Did you need to ask a lot of questions to the salesperson? Did you need to leave the store and did you need to come back? Are you the person that just makes quick decisions? You're like, yep, that fits in my living room. I'm ready to go. Like, how did you go about buying that? The reason that this is important to understand is because one, once you understand your buying strategy, you can really follow your journey with buying and making sure that you're buying things with intention. But when you understand that everyone has a different buying strategy, you can be intentional about how you're promoting and sharing your story in a way that relates to people. So can you share a story in a way that lays down as many facts as possible? So, for example, if maybe you're sharing facts about how much you invested in your first course, how many hours you dedicated to your first course, what were the pros and the cons. Like maybe you're sharing as many facts as possible, so that when you weave in your sale or your next step and how people can work with you, then now you're able to really speak to that, right? Now you're able to talk about, oh, for me, like looking back, these were some of the things that I really needed to know. And so I feel like this is great information for you guys to know, right? And you don't need to be a fact finder. And every time you tell a story, maybe the next time you need to like do a follow through. So maybe as you're telling a story, you can say like, while I was going through my book writing journey, I vowed to myself that no one would ever be stuck trying to figure out how to write a book. So I wrote out the entire system, the whole process, so that I could help people get from A to Z. And this is the way that the process is going to work. So you're literally laying out the follow through as you're telling the story, right? Maybe like that some people are just quick start. So sometimes you do stories in your actual story, like on Instagram, right? You're not typing out a story in a post, or you're not doing a live video, but you're more so doing a quick start story in your Instagram stories. And you're saying something like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited for what's coming next. You got to jump on this. Your future self's going to be so grateful for, right? That can speak to your quick start person. Sometimes you're speaking to your follow through person. Sometimes you're speaking to your fact finder person. Really understanding your people, understanding that they have different buying strategies, and understanding that they're going to have different needs can help you determine how you weave those different buying strategies into your strategy for sharing your story. Okay. And there's some reflective questions inside your workbook that you can start to use to kind of contemplate or think about these things as well. And then you're going to want to lay out your story that sells. Okay. So as you're thinking about the emotions you want to evoke, as you're thinking about your audience's experience with the program and the pathway they're going to take to be able to get there, as you're thinking about what is going to be that one thing that's going to tip them over to help them to say yes, to know, like, and trust you, and to take that next step to invest with you, start to lay out the story that sells. Okay. What story is that? What story is going to relate to your audience? Why is that story going to relate to your audience? How does that story relate or resonate with them? How does it speak to them? What emotions is that going to evoke? How is that going to let them know that they can overcome this pain point or bridge the gap from where they are to where they want to be? And as you're thinking about this story and as you're contemplating this story, understand that you're not married to one story. You can try your story one time and you can shift it and tell a different part of it, or the beginning part of it, or the middle part of it, or anything like that. You can really expand that and share different pieces of your story as you see fit, right? So there was a point, when I was sharing about the book writing process, I shared the affirmations piece of it. Then I shared how I became a bestseller. Then I shared about how I overcame limiting beliefs. Then I shared the productivity piece and how I balanced and got my kids on board. There are different parts of your story that may be related to the overall like niche topic. Okay. So really considering what story that you're going to tell that sells. Okay. And then consider where you'll share it. Right? Are you going to jump on like a Clubhouse talk and chat about it? Are you going to jump on a story or a live? Are you going to post about it on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, on your blog, right? Or will you find two different places to meet people kind of where they're at? Maybe some of your audience really likes video, so you decide to do YouTube, but then some of your audience really likes audio, so you decide to do a podcast. Where will you share it? How will you creatively weave it in to your content? That's going to be super, super important to consider. All right, guys. Sorry, my daughter stepped in. So let's dive back in. Okay. So we talked a little bit about laying out your story that sells. Now, I want to touch on the fact that you do not have to tell a story in every single type of post, right? Because for people to relate to you, people need to know you, they need to like you, and they need to trust you. And so part of that process is to really be able to showcase yourself as that expertise, with that expertise, as that leader, as that authority. And so a couple of different types of posts that you're going to want to create as you're weaving this in, because you don't want to just always tell a story, you don't want to just always ask for a sale, but you want to be creative and you want to have a bunch of different kinds of posts that you can share out. These are a couple different examples. So authority, letting them know that you are the leader, that you are the authority in your niche, that you know these things and you should be that go-to person for people to think of when they think of your particular niche or your particular topic or your particular focus. Expertise. Here's a surprise. You don't have to be an expert to showcase your expertise. All you got to do is be a few steps ahead of where your audience is to be able to draw them in, to be able to attract them and magnetize them, because you have something that they're desiring to learn from you. And I'm going to show you two posts that I made when I first got certified in human design, so you can kind of see like how I use those, even as I was starting to just experiment with my voice, right? Then we have connection and inspiration. So there's certain posts that you want to put out that just inspire people, that just connect or magnetize them and let them feel heard, or just be like, yeah, that message was for me today. Influence, a post that really influences them, lets them know like a healthy decision that they can make, or influences them to think differently, that sort of thing. And then anything, research is kind of like a catch-all, but maybe something that you've researched, maybe something that you learned. I made a post recently on social media where I learned that LeBron James invested 10% of his salary into investing. And I was like, if there's and Oprah Winfrey had three coaches. So if some of the most successful people in the world are investing in their personal development, why do any of us think that we should be not doing that, right? And I talked about that. And I talked about how much I learned from my own experience with investing and how valuable investing was for me. That was more so from some research that I did that I thought was valuable. And guess what? That still relates to the things that I offer, because I talk about investing. And a lot of times when people are working with me, they do have to take that next step and they do have to be willing to invest. And that can be scary. That can be like a little nerve-wracking. But when I'm talking about these powerful people that others are looking up to, it lets them know, one, I'm researching, so I'm knowledgeable and I'm learning new things and willing to bring it back. But two, lets them know how it relates to them, because I make it clear, like I bring it full circle. So I'm going to show you two posts. The first one is a story post, right? I talk about my human design, and I probably would say it's a story post, but in the sense of like, I wanted to inspire and connect with my audience. I wanted to let them know I can relate to where they're at. So I just wrote, when I first learned about my human design fully, I felt safe to be myself fully. You see, I was running from my dreams and my desires because I didn't feel like other people would ever understand or accept it. When I learned about my unique genetic makeup, I was so excited because it felt like things began to finally make sense. I then began to weave it into my life more and more. From there, I started learning how to make aligned decisions, which totally shifted my confidence. I learned how my energy operates in relationship to the energy of my business. I learned to focus on embracing peace, which is my signature, and avoiding frustration, which is my non self theme, on a greater scale. I also began to build a routine that helped me to create the success that I had only dreamed of before. I learned how to show up energetically in a way in which my business skyrocketed. Most importantly, I came to see my purpose and how to show up according to it. Human design changed my life in ways I can't even begin to put in words. And I don't mean to sound cliche, but it literally was so transformational, but only when you live according to it, right? Human design created my quantum leap, and that's available for you too. If you're looking for the tools and support to not only understand your human design, but to live according to it, sign up for my free Living Aligned by Design workshop using the button in my bio. The truth is, life is hard to navigate, but with human design, it makes it possible. It's your guide to living life intentionally. And this is why I'm so passionate about sharing it with you at a greater level. So I shared my journey to starting human design and what it did for me, but let them know it was available for them too. Really connecting the dots for them, really bringing it full circle. My second post, I would probably say, is just, again, more of that like engaging, but also like I wanted them to know, if I had to like narrow it down, and I usually try to keep like a board and let myself think of like where it can fit. So I use Asana, but I'll keep like an organization of where things follow or where things flow. But for me, I just really wanted to I just wanted to showcase that like authority, or that expertise, sorry. And also, again, be relatable, but there's different ways that you can do it. Many people feel boxed in and unfulfilled with the life that they're currently living. Can you relate? Knowing there has to be more to life, but wondering when you'll figure it out, wondering what your purpose is and when you'll come to live it, feeling like it's unsafe to share your deepest desires and dreams, questioning why you're so different than everyone else. You don't have to live like this any longer. Human design was the very system that gave me the freedom to give up who I thought I had to be to confidently step into who I was designed to be. Human design doesn't change who you are, it gives you full blown permission to be exactly who you are. If you're ready to understand your human design and live life in alignment with it, sign up for my free upcoming workshop. You guys get the point. So there's a different way. I weaved in a little small story with that, but it was more so, again, that relatability. But I'm also showcasing that expertise by talking about what human design has done, what human design can do for you. And so there are creative ways that you can weave in stories. And I have so many stories that I weave in. I did one on the eagle's nest and how I learned about the eagle's nest, and how that changed my perspective as far as taking leaps of faith and trusting God and trusting the journey and things like that. So I have weaved in stories in creative ways, sometimes in a small way, like the post on the right, sometimes in a larger scale. And I talk about how it applies in my life. But the point is, you want to be creative. Don't just always talk about a straightforward story. Don't just tell the same story. But find creative ways to weave it into what it is that you're doing, even if it is the same story or bits and pieces of the same story. Okay. So that's something just to think about. Things to consider when you're trying to start mapping out what your story is going to be, how you're going to get your story out there. Who are you? Right? Who are you? Not just your name, but who are you? Are you a transformational life coach? Are you a mom? Are you a person that loves to drink coffee? Start thinking about who you are and the things that are going to relate and resonate with your audience. What have you been through? What are some of the experiences that you've been through? How have you overcame what you've been through? How does this overcoming and this experience relate to your audience? What makes your story unique or different? I know for Lisa Nichols, her story is super powerful to me, but she was a single mom and she didn't have enough money to buy her son diapers. I've heard this story a million times. But what's so powerful to me is that she literally just made one decision one day where she was like, this is it. I can't be in a situation where I can't buy him diapers. something has to change. She didn't sit and think about it. She didn't try to justify it. She didn't allow herself to make excuses. She literally made a shift in her mindset and shifted her life. That story is different than every other single mom who continued to me to struggle, because that was me. As a single mom, I played victim to my circumstances where I was very frustrated. I was very overwhelmed and, oh, well, it's me. But that didn't get me anywhere. And hearing her story was like, oh, somebody's been in my shoes before. And they were like, forget it. Like, I'm not going to continue like this. That her story was different because that motivated me, that pulled me, that drew me out of where I was. So what makes your story different, right? It could be the same story, but maybe it's just your spin. Maybe it's your perspective. That's what makes your story different. How can you highlight your expertise in what you do? You know, one of the things that I share as a big piece of my story is I talk about achievement addiction. And I talk about how, I grew up in an abusive household, and my mom's ex-husband would always tell me I wouldn't be anything. And so I felt this extensive need to prove that I could be something over the top. I was always over the top with my accomplishments, my grades and my degrees and my certifications and all of these things, over the top. But in the same time, as I'm telling this story, I'm talking about the great things that I learned through my experience. I went on to be a trauma-informed counselor for years because I wanted to support people that lived in traumatic households, because I did myself. And so I talk about how I weave trauma support work into what I do. So not only am I telling my story of like this achievement addiction, but I'm weaving in my ability to learn and how I bring in what I learned into the work that I do with my clients. So highlight your expertise. Don't be scared to toot your own horn that you are the expert. And here's the key thing that I need you to know. You don't only have to be an expert based on, some degree of certification. You can be an expert based on your experience. Okay. Also consider how you're giving value, right? Don't just give information. This was a big thing for me because I like to learn. So I'm like, oh, I want to share this really cool fact. And so I would get on there and post, did you know that this, and this, right? Okay, like, what does that mean? Like, how does that apply to me? Explain how that information is going to apply and to bring it full circle. So if I just said, wow, LeBron James invests 10% of his salary into his personal development. Wow, Oprah Winfrey has 3 coaches. What does that mean? So I needed to take it and I needed to apply how that can be transformational for other people. How are you investing in yourself? How do you expect yourself to continue to grow if you're not willing to invest that time or that money or that commitment to being able to take that next step? I needed to bring that information full circle. So yes, share information, but make sure you're sharing it from a place that's transformational for your audience. Explaining again why what you're sharing matters. I have a really good peer in the coaching space, and a lot of times she'll talk about her journey because she grew up super, super, super poor. And so it matters to her that she has been able to show her family something different. And so that it matters. And maybe there's somebody out there that needs to know that they can show their family something different. And then put a call to action when necessary. Here's the thing, you don't need to put a call to action on every single step. It could be, so you don't need to put the same call to action on every single step. So let's say, for example, I had those 2 human design posts. Let's say I made a third one after that. The third one may say, double tap if you know that this is going to be your year of living in alignment. Double tap if you've seen an angel number that's confirmation that you're ready to step into that next level. Leave a comment if you agree. Like, there can be a call to action, but it doesn't always need to be buy this, step in my DM. Find a way to just be you, just relate, just bring in your story, but in a way that's really magnetizing and drawing in your audience. Okay. So as you're creating your story, as you're really laying it out and you're trying to think of how your story is going to relate, how your story is going to support your audience and all of these things, do not be afraid to pay attention to the feedback, and do not feel like you have to be married to this one and done story. Okay. You may have a story, you may really relate to it, you may think it's bomb, but if your audience isn't engaging, or if they're not asking questions about it, they're not giving feedback, that may mean shift it up a little bit. How can you add more? How can you take away, how can you take away a little bit? How can you adjust it based on the feedback that you're getting? And so, like, for example, I got feedback when I was posting about my Living Aligned by Design workshop, and people were saying, well, how did you get started with human design? That's feedback, right? And then I get to take that feedback to feed my next step. How can I start weaving in that part of my process? Same thing with you. You're not married to this concept as a one and a done. Get that feedback and adjust accordingly. And before you know it, you're really going to be able to perfect your story. For me, I've told a lot of these stories over and over again, bits and pieces and parts of it. But every time I tell it with just a little bit of a different angle based on the most recent feedback I got, or based on something that I think may resonate or relate to the person that I'm speaking to in the manner. And because of that, I've been able to really magnetize and draw in people who enjoy listening to those bits and pieces of the story because it's coming from a genuine place, and because it's coming from a place that's like, I know why she's telling me that. This is something that I needed to hear today. Okay. So don't be afraid to get that feedback and to adjust accordingly. All right. Here's the thing, guys. I always say my footprints get to become my clients' blueprints. A lot of times we'll go through different tests and we'll go through different like failures, and we'll try to shy away from them, or we'll try to hide away from it. But sometimes, not sometimes, all the time, that test can be somebody's testimony, right? And you're sitting on something that could bless somebody, that can give them the world's greatest breakthrough, but you're sitting on it out of embarrassment or not being sure how to tell your story. Stop allowing fear to keep you stagnant. Stop allowing fear to keep you from sharing the things that other people need to hear. Because guess what? The footprints that you took to get to where you are may become the blueprints that somebody is sitting there and waiting and needing. So I'm gonna be done here lecturing you. I'm gonna challenge you to dive in and start mapping out the stories that you want to showcase, mapping out the stories that you want to share, mapping out the stories that you know are going to magnetize, draw in, and attract your audience. And I'm so excited to see what you're going to be able to produce. The key thing, and the last thing I'm going to leave you with, is your authenticity is your greatest asset. Okay. Don't try to be somebody else. Don't try to force yourself to tell the story in a way that somebody else has done it. Tell it from a place of passion, tell it from a place of flow, and allow your story to just get out there. And you are naturally going to be able to magnetize and draw in those people who need to hear it most. All right. You totally got this. Go ahead and get started.